Yo, listen, this one right here just tore the roof off the whole hip-hop internet, and if you thought last week was loud, you haven't heard nothing yet, because what Cameron just detonated on his own platform is the kind of story that flips careers, buries reputations, and rewrites the rulebook on how these industry favors really work behind the curtain. Talk about a rerun nobody signed up for. Y'all better sit down for this one, because we've been here before, and the pattern is so loud it's practically screaming through the speakers. Cameron hands out a verse to a hungry artist. That artist's people swear on everything that they'll pull up on Cam's platform and sit down for the interview of a lifetime. Something goes sideways somewhere between the studio and the release, and the next thing anybody knows, Cameron is behind his own microphone, on his own show, in his own house, ready to burn the whole arrangement down in front of millions. If that setup sounds oddly familiar, it should, because this is the exact same script that ran the last time Cameron and J. Cole got into that little tangle, and now Cameron is running the play back with Cardi B's camp caught right in the middle of the crossfire. First time it's a mistake. Second time it's a strategy. And Cameron is not the type of dude to let a strategy die quietly. Let me back up for a second and paint this picture the way it actually needs to be painted, because half the timeline is running with headlines they haven't even read past the thumbnail. Cameron, in case anybody's been living under a rock, retired from the traditional rap grind a while back, but retirement in hip-hop is never really retirement, especially not when you've got a Harlem Legends Rolodex, decades of goodwill, and a voice that can still tear the paint off a hook. So what Cameron did was pivot the empire. He built out It Is What It Is with Maze over on the sports side, and he stacked Talk with Flea on top of that over at Revolt, and now the whole ecosystem is a media house that runs on views, ad reads, clip farming, and the one currency every modern platform prints in mass quantity: attention. And attention, as anybody who's ever tried to grow a show already knows, doesn't just fall out of the sky. You've got to book it, chase it, corner it, and sometimes trade for it. That's where the verse for interview handshake enters the chat, and that's where Cardi B's team allegedly stepped in a bear trap they didn't even know was set. According to what Cameron is putting on record himself, Cardi B's people had been circling him for what he's calling somewhere between 2 and 3 years, chasing a specific favor. They wanted Cameron on a record. Not just any record, they wanted him on a rework of one of his own classic joints, What Means the World to You, a Harlem anthem so sacred that even hearing the beat brings the block back to life. Cardi's camp, in Cam's own telling, wanted him on the hook and on a verse, and they were willing to sweeten the deal by delivering Cardi herself to sit down on Cameron's show. Simple math, right? Cameron blesses the record, Cardi B pulls up on Talk with Flea, everybody eats, the algorithm eats, and the culture eats twice. Except somewhere along the way, according to Cameron, the math started breaking down. The way Cam is telling it, months turned into more months, calls turned into missed calls, deadlines slid past deadlines, and every time Cameron thought the album had already dropped and the window had already closed, Cardi's team would pop back up like the whole clock had reset. Cameron says at one point he genuinely believed he had missed the release entirely, only for the team to come back and swear the project still wasn't out. He kept saying he was busy, he kept saying he'd knock it out, he kept saying he loves Cardi B like a sister, and he emphasizes that part hard, because Cameron is not the kind of vet who's going to torch a fellow rapper on his own platform without making it painfully clear that his beef is not with the artist. His beef is with the people around the artist. His beef, in his exact words, is with 2 specific individuals on Cardi B's team who he says have been harassing him, running him in circles, and making promises on Cardi's behalf that Cardi may not even know were made. Eventually, Cameron says, after a year and a half of the back and forth, he stopped what he was doing, took an hour out of his day, laid the verse down, and sent it in. Clean. Professional. Handled. He did what he said he was going to do. And then he moved on, because that's what a veteran does: you finish the job, you cash the goodwill, and you trust the other side to hold up their end. But Cameron says he wasn't even really tracking the release cycle after that. He wasn't refreshing DSP dashboards. He wasn't hunting down leaks. He was doing his sports show, running his podcast, sitting courtside, doing what Cameron does. So when he finally sat down with one of his home girls and heard her mention how nice Cardi's new joint was, Cameron's response was pure Cameron: wait, the album dropped? And when he went to check the track list expecting to see his own name printed in lights, he found something that flipped his entire mood. His verse wasn't there. His hook wasn't there. His contribution, the thing they'd been chasing him for 2, maybe 3 years to deliver, had been cut clean out of the finished project. Now, at this point, most vets would just chalk it up, subtweet it once, and move on. But Cameron is not most vets. Cameron built his career on the exact kind of unshakable Harlem confidence that turns a slight into a saga, and he decided right there and then that if the interview wasn't coming through and the compensation wasn't coming through, then somebody in Cardi B's camp was going to feel the full weight of Talk with Fleece audience landing on their name. He looked into the mic and told the internet, without hesitation, that if the situation wasn't corrected, he was ready to start exposing the two individuals he's holding responsible. Not Cardi. Not the label. Not the fans. The two managers, the co-writer, the shadow operators, the ones who work behind Cardi B's name and, according to Cameron, keep writing checks with their mouth that their reputation can't cash. And then Cameron did the thing that turned this from a business dispute into a full-blown cultural event. He said, on camera, that he has receipts. He said he has text messages. He said he has screenshots. He said he has details about these two individuals that he's been sitting on, and if the payment or the interview doesn't come through, those details are going up on the Talk with Fleece screen. And when Cameron says, the Talk with Fleece screen, he's not just threatening to post a tweet. He's threatening to put whatever he's got on the same broadcast surface that runs Summer Jam level embarrassment moments in front of a viewership that has, in his own words, more eyeballs than any Summer Jam screen ever pulled. That's not a threat. That's a nuclear option delivered with a smile. The way Cameron laid it out, if the situation doesn't get resolved, he's going to start dropping names, dropping fetishes, dropping receipts, and dropping what he's calling their whole resume of nasty behavior. Every week. Every episode. Cameron promised the internet, on camera, that if he doesn't get his interview or his compensation, the next episode of Talk with Flea is going to open with the text messages he says were sent to him, messages he says disgusted him at first, but that he's now framing as a divine gift, delivered directly to his inbox by the universe itself, so that he could use them exactly when the moment called for it. And this is where the whole thing gets so cinematic it almost feels engineered. Because Cameron didn't just say he had the messages, he said he already knows what these two individuals are into, what they like, and what they wouldn't want the world to know. He referenced positions. He referenced fetishes. He referenced a specific screenshot he says he almost couldn't believe when he first opened it. He described, in the kind of language only Cameron can get away with on live camera, exactly the type of content he says is sitting in his phone waiting for a green light. And then, in one of the most Cameron sentences ever put on tape, he told the audience, he doesn't even want to post the screenshots. He'd rather just get his compensation and move on. But if the compensation doesn't come, the screenshots are coming, and the world is going to learn some very intimate things about two people who thought they could run circles around a Harlem veteran and walk away untouched. Let's break this down clean, because there's about 4 different plays happening on this chessboard at the same time, and if you're not paying attention, you're going to miss the real move. Point 1. Cameron is being extremely careful, surgically careful, to protect Cardi B herself throughout the entire tirade. He says her name, then immediately says, my sister. He says her team is playing games, then immediately says Cardi probably doesn't even know. He calls her flow tremendous. He calls her career something that needs to be studied. He praises her arc from where she started to where she is now. Cameron is not attacking Cardi B, Cameron is building a firewall between Cardi B and the two people he's about to torch, and that firewall is going to matter later, because it means Cardi B has a clean lane to either respond, ignore it, or ride the wave without ever having to defend herself. Cameron gave her the exit ramp before he even loaded the gun. Point 2. The two individuals Cameron is threatening are the real target audience of this entire episode. They're watching. Cameron knows they're watching. Everybody who works in artist management in New York, Atlanta, Miami, and LA is watching. And Cameron is essentially running a public deterrence campaign in real time. He's telling every co-writer, every manager, every A&R, every gatekeeper who has ever pulled up in his DMs asking for a favor, if you promise the interview and you don't deliver the interview, your entire personal life is now negotiable currency on my platform. That is not just a Cardi B story. That is a warning shot fired into the entire industry, and every operator who has ever ghosted Cameron after collecting a favor is now scrolling through their old texts trying to figure out if they're next. Point 3. This could be a rollout. And I know some of y'all are going to roll your eyes and say I'm reaching, but hear me out, because we have literally seen this exact movie before. When the J. Cole situation played out, the internet was ready to declare war, and then it turned out to be one of the most calculated, most viewership-maximizing rollouts in modern podcast history. Cameron knows that controversy is a booking assistant. Cameron knows that a public dispute is the fastest way to force a private conversation. And Cameron knows that if Cardi B's team can't book the interview through the front door, the fastest way to make sure Cardi B ends up on that couch is to make her team feel like their entire existence depends on it. This could be a warm-up act for the real show. If Cardi B walks into talk with Flea within the next 30 days, we're going to have a very serious talk about how many of these blow-ups are organic and how many of them are the smartest promotional plays in the modern hip-hop podcast landscape. Point 4. How many other artists are sitting in this exact same situation with Cameron right now? Because if Cameron says he did a verse for Cardi B's project in exchange for an interview, and that same handshake got tested with J. Cole, and now Cameron is publicly floating the idea that anybody who doesn't hold up their end of the bargain is getting their whole track record aired out, then it stands to reason that there's a stack of similar arrangements sitting in Cameron's phone right now. There has to be. Cameron didn't invent the verse for interview trade last week. He's been running that model for years. Every rapper who slid into his email asking for a hook is now sitting somewhere sweating, checking their calendar, and wondering if they ever booked that interview they promised. Now, before anybody rushes into the comments section swinging, let's address the elephant sitting on the couch. Some folks are already asking, is what Cameron just threatened actually crossing a line? Because if you strip the humor and the charisma out of what Cameron said, what you have is a public figure with a massive platform openly declaring that unless a certain group of people pay him or deliver a booking, he is going to release private text messages and expose personal information about those individuals. In some legal frameworks, that starts sounding awfully close to extortion, and in other legal frameworks, it starts sounding awfully close to revenge-adjacent behavior. Cameron obviously has the First Amendment right to talk about anybody who's ever texted him. The courts are pretty consistent on that, but there's a real conversation to be had about the moral position of using intimate personal receipts as leverage in a business dispute. Slide in the comments section and put me on, because I want to hear where y'all land on this one. Because on one hand, Cameron is standing on business, and on the other hand, we're talking about screenshots of private moments being weaponized on a podcast that pulls millions of views a week. That's a line, and depending on where you're standing, it either just got crossed or it just got illuminated. Here's the other thing that's making the timeline pop right now. Cameron didn't just threaten the release of texts. He also said, in the same breath, that the verse itself, the one that got cut from Cardi's album, is coming out. He's going to drop the record. He's going to let the streets hear what they were denied. And that is a masterclass in cultural leverage, because now, whether or not the interview ever happens, whether or not the compensation ever comes, whether or not the two managers ever get exposed, Cameron has already reclaimed the asset. He owns the verse. He owns the recording. He owns the moment. And by putting it out on his own, he's turning what could have been a footnote in Cardi B's discography into a headline in his own. That's not a scorned collaborator. That's a chess player 3 moves ahead of the board. And you know what makes this whole thing even messier? Cardi B is currently in one of the most closely watched eras of her entire career. Every move she makes is being clipped, every lyric she drops is being dissected, every appearance she gives is being cross-referenced with her personal life, her label politics, and her positioning against every other female rapper in the game right now. So the very last thing her camp needs is a Harlem legend on Revolt spending every Wednesday night dragging her management team through a public gauntlet. That is not just bad press. That is career-shortening turbulence, because the moment a rapper's management team becomes the story instead of the rapper, sponsors start hesitating, features start slowing down, and every promoter starts double-checking the paperwork before they cut a deposit. If Cardi B's people are smart, and let's be very generous and assume they are, this is a 5-alarm fire that has to be put out before the next episode of Talk with Flea even hits the recording booth. Now Cameron did throw one small mercy into the mix, and it's worth pointing out, because it tells you everything about how his mind works. He said he's not going to say the names this week. He's going to give the team one more window. One more chance. One more shot to reach out, honor the arrangement, cut the check, book the interview, and end the standoff before the receipts hit the screen. That is a Harlem-style ultimatum, delivered with a smile, and dressed up as generosity. And every second that goes by without Cardi B's camp responding is a second where the pressure valve tightens, because Cameron said the next episode is where the fireworks start, and if Cameron said it, Cameron meant it. Let me also point out something the culture is sleeping on, because if you've been following the arc of Cameron's post-retirement pivot, you already know that Cameron has become one of the sharpest content architects in this entire space. He's not just running It Is What It Is and Talk with Flea. He's basically running a media laboratory where every clip is engineered for maximum share velocity, every segment is calibrated for the algorithm, and every controversy, whether accidental or intentional, becomes fuel for the next surge. Cameron has turned the podcast game into a Harlem chess match, and this Cardi B situation is not an accident. Whether it started as one or not, Cameron is now steering it with the precision of someone who has watched every single ratings needle move over the last 2 years and knows exactly what kind of headline moves the needle the hardest. And a Harlem legend exposes major stars team over broken promise headline? That's the kind of headline that runs the entire week. Now, on the sympathy side of the equation, and let's be honest about this, there is a very real case to be made for Cameron here. Because if the timeline he described is accurate, Cardi B's team really did chase this man for years, really did ask for a personal favor, really did promise him something in exchange, and really did fail to deliver on every single side of that arrangement. And when you make a promise to a Harlem legend in exchange for a piece of music, you don't get to just walk away when it stops being convenient. That's not how the culture works. That's not how business works. And in hip-hop especially, verbal contracts carry more weight than a lot of people realize, because reputations are built on whether you show up when you said you would. Cameron showed up. He laid the verse. He gave up an hour of his life to bless a record. Cardi B's team, if we're taking Cameron at his word, did not show up. And when a favor goes unreturned in this business, the person who got left in the cold usually gets to write the story that follows. Cameron is now writing that story, and he's writing it in permanent ink. The question that keeps circling my brain, though, is why? Why did Cardi B's team, if they really did chase Cameron for that long, decide at the last second to cut the verse and skip the interview? Because there are a few theories floating around, and none of them make Cardi's team look particularly clean. Theory 1 is that the record simply didn't test well with the younger demographic. Cameron mentioned it himself, What Means the World to You is a 90s beat, and some of Cardi's core audience apparently didn't vibe with the throwback flow on the pre-release single, Imaginary Player. That's a real possibility, and if it's true, then Cardi's team pulled Cameron's contribution as an A&R decision, which is business. But business doesn't excuse not booking the interview afterward. Theory 2 is more cynical. Maybe the promise was never real to begin with, and Cameron's verse was collected under the assumption that a Harlem legend wouldn't stick around long enough to demand what he was owed. That would be a monumental misread. Theory 3 is that internal politics inside Cardi's camp shifted, and the two individuals Cameron is threatening are now the ones scrambling to prevent the receipts from landing. Whatever the truth is, Cameron isn't asking anymore. He's demanding. And this is what makes the whole situation so combustible. Because Cameron is not a rapper you can wait out. He's not a rapper you can PR spin around. He's not a rapper who's going to forget about this in 3 weeks. Cameron holds grudges the way other rappers hold jewelry, permanently, visibly, and with a specific kind of pride. He said, in the middle of the same episode, that he was going to start dropping a weekly list. A weekly list, y'all. Every 7 days, a new name. Every 7 days, a new pile of receipts. Every 7 days, a fresh layer of embarrassment for anybody in the industry who ever asked Cameron for a favor and didn't hold up their end. That is not just a threat aimed at Cardi B's team. That is a threat aimed at every rapper, every manager, every A&R, every co-writer, every producer, and every social media handler who has ever called Cameron's phone with their hand out. Cameron is essentially telling the industry, you gave me your promise. I kept the receipts. And I'm running out of patience. Now let's talk strategy, because Cameron is not just making threats. He's making moves. He said the verse is coming out anyway. He said the interview slot is still open. He said the compensation window hasn't closed. He said he's willing to accept a resolution up until the very moment he presses the button on the next episode. That is a negotiator's ladder, delivered inside a viral clip. Every rung of that ladder is a public offer, and every offer is being watched by a fanbase that will absolutely hold Cardi B's camp accountable if they don't take one of the rungs. Cameron didn't just call his shot. He handed the ball to the other team and told them to try to score with it. And now the entire industry is watching to see whether Cardi B's people are smart enough to catch the ball, dumb enough to fumble it, or arrogant enough to walk off the court. Meanwhile, let's not forget the collateral fireworks lighting up in the background. Cameron dropping this bomb also puts every other female rapper's camp on high alert, because if Cameron is willing to publicly slap a management team that works with one of the biggest women in the game, then no camp in the entire genre is safe. Nicki Minaj's camp is watching. Megan Thee Stallion's camp is watching. Latto's camp is watching. Ice Spice's camp is watching. Every publicist, every stylist, every road manager, every social media handler in the female rap ecosystem is right now doing a mental inventory of whether they've ever promised Cameron anything they didn't follow through on. And I promise you, in every one of those meetings this week, there's going to be a producer or an assistant quietly checking their DMs and hoping they're not the next name in Cameron's list. There's also the sports side of this to consider, because Cameron isn't just running a rap podcast. He's running It Is What It Is with Maze, and that show has become one of the most influential barbershop-style sports commentary shows in the entire modern landscape. That means Cameron's brand is now bigger than hip-hop. It sits at the intersection of rap, sports, comedy, and streetwear. So when Cameron says he's willing to escalate against Cardi B's team, he's escalating with the weight of a multi-vertical media empire behind him. That's not a rapper versus a rapper's manager. That's a media house versus a management office. And history has been pretty clear about how those matchups usually end. Media houses have longer memories, sharper microphones, and larger audiences than management offices. Cameron knows this. Cameron built this. And Cameron is not scared to use it. But here's where I have to slow down and give you the honest counter perspective, because if I just cheerlead for Cameron the whole way through, I'm not doing my job. There is a very real world in which Cameron is overplaying his hand right now. There is a very real world in which the two individuals he's threatening decide to lawyer up, subpoena the very screenshots he's flexing, and turn this into a courtroom instead of a podcast. There is a very real world in which Cardi B, offended on behalf of her camp, closes ranks and freezes Cameron out of the female rap coverage rotation entirely, which would cost his podcast a lot more views over time than a single episode of exposure could ever recover. And there is a very real world in which the culture, which loves Cameron dearly, decides that dragging text messages and fetishes onto a podcast is a step too far, no matter how justified the original grievance was. Because at the end of the day, hip-hop respects the settling of scores, but hip-hop also respects the boundaries between business beef and personal humiliation. Cameron has walked right up to that line, tapped it with his shoe, and told the entire industry that if he doesn't get his interview, he's stepping over. That is a gamble. It might be a genius gamble, the kind of chess move that gets him the biggest booking of the year, refills the talk with flea content pipeline for months, and cements his place as the most fearless commentator in the modern podcast era. Or it might be a gamble that ages badly, ends up in a courtroom, and forces Revolt itself to have a very uncomfortable conversation about what kind of content their platform is willing to host. Either way, we're all about to find out live, in real time, over the next few episodes. Now, if I'm Cardi B's actual manager, the real one, not one of the two individuals in Cameron's crosshairs, I'm sitting down tonight, canceling every other meeting on the calendar, and calling Cameron directly before the sun comes up tomorrow. Because every hour that goes by is another hour of internet speculation, another hour of memes, another hour of clips being re-uploaded to 1,000 fan pages, and another hour of Cameron's audience marinating in the idea that Cardi B's team disrespected a Harlem legend. That perception, once it sets, is almost impossible to reverse. And the only way to prevent it from setting is to give Cameron either the interview, the compensation, or a public apology that closes the loop before the next episode airs. Anything less than that is going to be interpreted by the internet as arrogance, and the internet punishes arrogance faster than it punishes almost any other sin. Meanwhile, in the middle of all this, Cardi B herself has been noticeably quiet. She hasn't tweeted about it. She hasn't gone live about it. She hasn't dropped a subtweet or an Instagram story or a cryptic emoji. And honestly, that silence is probably the smartest move she could be making right now, because Cameron already built her the firewall. He said Cardi doesn't know. He said Cardi is his sister. He said his beef is not with Cardi, So the smartest thing Cardi can do is stay exactly where she is, let her real manager clean up the mess, and pop up on Talk with Flea 2 months from now with a huge smile, a huge segment, and a huge boost to Cameron's numbers. If that happens, we'll know the entire situation was more rollout than blow up. And if it doesn't happen, if Cardi never sits on that couch, then we'll know Cameron really did mean every word, and the two individuals he named will spend the next several years hoping the internet has a shorter memory than Harlem. So here's where I'm landing on this whole saga, and I want y'all to sit with this for a second before you type. Cameron is doing 3 things at once, and every one of them is a chess move. He's protecting Cardi B, which keeps him from becoming the villain of his own story. He's exposing the anonymous middleman, which taps into every single fan who has ever hated an industry gatekeeper. And he's teasing content, a verse, an interview, a list, a set of receipts, that virtually guarantees his platform will be the most clicked destination in the culture for the next several weeks. That's not just a rant. That's a business plan. That's a rollout. That's a Harlem chess grandmaster running the game the same way he ran it the last time everybody thought it was a coincidence. And if you think this is the last we've heard from Cameron about promises unkept, favors uncashed, and text messages he wasn't supposed to see, you are underestimating the man who built the entire, on my mama, school of Harlem storytelling. Cameron is not done. Cameron is barely getting started. Cameron is going to milk this arc for every drop of leverage it will give him. And if Cardi B's team doesn't reach out before the next episode goes live, the internet is going to have a new set of names, a new set of fetishes, and a new set of receipts to argue about all weekend. Before I let y'all go, let me toss out one more piece of speculation, because I know some of y'all are already halfway to the comment section. What if the actual endgame here isn't Cardi B at all? What if Cameron using Cardi's team as the public example is actually a warning shot to a completely different artist's camp, one Cameron doesn't want to name yet, that also owes him something? Because the way Cameron kept saying, y'all better be airtight, and, you better have a clean track record, and, I'ma put out a weekly list, that language is broader than one dispute. That language is the kind of language you use when you're clearing your throat before a bigger announcement. If I had to bet money on it, I'd bet that inside the next 4 weeks, at least one more major artist's team is going to get pulled into this, publicly. Cameron didn't design this framework to end at Cardi's front door. Cameron designed this framework to run for a whole season. And by the time we get to the finale, the entire industry's book of favors is going to look completely different than it did last Tuesday. So talk to me. Do y'all think Cameron is genuinely fed up and swinging, or do y'all think this is a masterclass rollout engineered to book the biggest interview of the year? Do y'all think Cardi B is going to sit down on Talk with Flea within the next 30 days, or do y'all think her camp is going to try to freeze Cameron out and hope the internet loses interest? And most importantly, how many other artists do y'all think are currently sitting in their group chat right now asking themselves whether they're next on Cameron's list? Because if my instincts are right, there's at least 10 more of these stories sitting inside Cameron's phone, waiting for the right episode. Drop your name predictions in the comments. Drop your theories in the comments. Drop the receipts if you've got them, because y'all know how this show works, the community always figures it out faster than the professionals do. Tap that like, lock in on the channel, and I'll catch you on the next one, because when Cameron says the next episode is going to be worse than the last, we're going to be right here, first in line, breaking down every second of it, name by name, receipt by receipt, and screenshot by screenshot. Cameron just changed the entire rules of how hip-hop podcast leverage works, and the rest of the industry is about to spend the next 6 months trying to figure out how to play the new game. Stay locked in. This one's just getting started. And speaking of things that are just getting started, let's zoom out one more time and put this whole Cameron and Cardi B situation into the bigger picture the internet keeps missing. Because what Cameron just did isn't just a moment, it's a mirror. It's holding up a reflection of exactly how modern hip-hop actually operates behind the velvet rope, and the people who don't want you to see that reflection are the exact same 2 individuals Cameron is threatening to name on the next episode of Talk with Flea. Think about how many features get promised in this genre every single week that never materialize into interviews, appearances, co-signs, or credited placements. Think about how many veterans have quietly given up their time, their catalog, and their credibility to help push a new artist over the top, only to be ghosted the moment the artist crosses the finish line. Cameron is not the first veteran to get burned like that. Cameron is just the first veteran with a big enough platform, a sharp enough tongue, and a stubborn enough backbone to say the quiet part out loud, on camera, in front of millions of people, with the receipt sitting in his back pocket. And that is exactly why Cardi B's camp has to move fast. Because the longer this saga sits inside the news cycle unresolved, the more it invites every other veteran with a similar grievance to piggyback on the moment. Imagine if next week another Harlem legend, or another Queensbridge vet, or another Bronx pioneer, decides to pull up on their own podcast and say, Cameron's not the only one who got played. Suddenly this isn't a Cameron story anymore. Suddenly it's an industry-wide reckoning, and Cardi B's team ends up as the case study everybody references for the rest of the decade. That is the doomsday scenario for any management office, and if Cardi's people don't see that trajectory coming, they're not watching the right clocks. Now let me hit y'all with one more angle nobody in the comments section is talking about yet. Cameron is a business owner. Cameron is a media executive. Cameron is a Harlem entrepreneur with skin in multiple games. And Cameron knows something that most rappers still haven't figured out: in the modern content economy, the person with the microphone always wins the argument. Doesn't matter who was right. Doesn't matter what actually happened. The person with the platform gets to write the first draft of the story, and the first draft is the one the internet remembers. Cameron just wrote the first draft. Cardi B's team is now stuck trying to write a second draft that has to compete with an original that already has millions of impressions. That is not a fair fight. That is not a rebuildable position. That is a chessboard where the opening move has already checkmated 3 of your major pieces. And the only way out of that position, in real life, is to negotiate, quietly, quickly, and generously, before the next episode airs and the position gets even worse. So when I circle all the way back to the beginning and ask myself what this whole saga is really about, my answer keeps landing in the same place. This isn't just about a missing verse. This isn't just about a broken interview promise. This is about power. This is about who gets to control the narrative in modern hip-hop. This is about whether veterans get to enforce the culture's unwritten contracts or whether new money handlers can walk in and violate those contracts without consequences. Cameron just cast his vote. His vote is that the veterans are still in charge, the culture still has rules, and the platforms are the new courtroom. Cardi B's team is going to have to decide, before Wednesday night, whether they want to accept that verdict quietly or fight it publicly. Either way, we're watching. Either way, we're winning content. And either way, Cameron just delivered one of the most memorable hip-hop podcast moments of the entire year, and it's not even close to being over yet. Stay locked in, because the next chapter is going to hit even harder, and if you're new to the channel, welcome to the front row, because this is exactly the kind of coverage we do best.